So first of all, let me just say the purpose of the CommuniZooms is just to say hello to everybody and to, you know, be a point of contact in the week, especially for people in the NLP community who may be at home or who may be working in different ways. And again, I just want to say that I really appreciate that people are in very different places, literally, during this crisis and this very, very difficult time for all of us. And I really appreciate, I'm not trying to be sort of like, you know, Ms. Perky cheering our way through this. On the other hand, that is part of it, because I also want to appreciate that some people in our community are going through terrible stress and loss and bereavement and grief and all of those things. So we've got like all, you know, all possible human experiences are with us. And so my aim is to give you some reminders and some ideas, which I hope in whatever place you're coming from, that is going to be helpful to you at this time. I also want to just say that our talk with Judy Delosia last week, we're going to get that back on tape again tomorrow, and that should be out by next week. So you'll be able to, everyone will be able to see Judy. So my topic this week, as it's quite an interesting thing that coming up in the papers a lot about this idea of metaphors and the kind of images that we're using. And of course, this is very much part of how we work in NLP, because we're interested in how people's minds work, how they construct and reconstruct their reality, and the kind of influence and impact, the cause effect of holding a particular map in your mind of a situation, where that leads to. And this shows up in our language and our imagery, for better and for worse. I want to just, first of all, remind us of the Arundhati Roy thing that I read last time, which was just the last couple of lines. So the purpose of this is, can we imagine another world beyond this, you know, and get ready to fight for it? I really love that quote that we did. Was it last week? I think we did it. And then I've got another little quote here, which again is about language and about imagery. And it's by the writer Rebecca Solnit, who is probably or possibly, you know, known to some of you as the author of that essay, Men Explain Things to Me. I'll say no more. But this is about the word emergency. And she says inside the word emergency is emerge. Inside the word emergency is emerge. From an emergency, new things come forth. The old certainties are crumbling fast, but danger and possibility are sisters. I thought that was really nice, because it's all about what is it that we want to emerge from this emergency, and how can we play our part? How can we be active contributors and participants in creating, you know, the next phase of the world? So there's three things briefly on metaphors and imagery and archetypes as well. I think I packed all this into this one, you know, 25 minutes. One is going to be about metaphors, one is going to touch on submodalities, and one is going to be this lovely kind of archetypes model developed by Robert Dilts and Stephen Gilligan. So just to say with metaphors, actually one of my favorite quotes by Bateson, and it gets me thinking all the time, is this: everything is a metaphor for everything else. Everything is a metaphor for everything else. It's a very, very interesting, you know, way to approach many, many situations. So of course a metaphor is like this kind of implicit comparison of one thing to another. It's a kind of fundamental way of how our minds work, that we analogize and we use our language particularly to create it's like this, it's like that, in these more often concrete kind of ways. And I wanted to say something about some of the research on metaphors, first of all, which is to say that metaphors aren't just descriptive. they're also kind of influential. They take us down a certain path. And some of you who are interested in, you know, cognitive metaphor theory will know some of the, I've got 3 little bits of research, which you may or may not know. But so there's a metaphor that physical warmth equals social warmth. Physical warmth equals social warmth. And there's a great experiment where, as you're coming into the experimental research area, you're handed a drink, and it's either a cold drink or a hot drink. So in other words, you're holding something warm or you're holding something cold. And then you go into the sort of research proper, as it were. And then a rather ambiguous description of a kind of anonymous person is read to you. And it turns out that if you've been holding a hot drink, you are more likely in this ambiguity, because we always make sense of ambiguities, of course, we disambiguate and we create our own meanings. If we've been holding the hot drink, we're more likely to think of that person as sort of like with warm type attributes, like they're generous, they're compassionate, etc., etc. Very, very interesting. So physical warmth equals a kind of social warmth. The other thing is that after this experiment, if you're asked, you're offered a gift, you're offered something as a sort of payment for taking part. And it's something you can either give to someone else or you can keep it for yourself. And if you were given the hot drink, you're more likely to give your gift to somebody else. So there's something about warmth and social connection, this kind of interesting metaphor. The second one I thought I'd give, which Muriel will like particularly, because it's called the Macbeth Effect. And as you all know, Macbeth slaughters everybody, blah, blah. And there's this great bit with Lady Macbeth going, will these, I won't do it in a Scottish accent, Muriel, you'll be pleased to hear. But yes, will these fair hands ne'er be clean? Out, out, damned spot. So it's very interesting, the idea that guilt is like, the metaphor that people use for guilt is kind of uncleanliness. And they've actually done some research that shows that if people are asked to reflect on their own sort of moral, unethical shortcomings, they are more likely to, when they're asked to rate certain kinds of products, they will rate cleaning products higher. Okay, so they've been asked to reflect on their unethical doings. Given a range of products, they rate the ones to do with cleanliness and hygiene and cleaning much, much higher. And also given a kind of gift, so they're offered like, well, would you like a pencil or would you like an antiseptic wipe? And twice as many people choose the antiseptic wipe. Will these fair hands ne'er be clean? My guilt and my uncleanliness, my, dirty-handedness. And then just a last one, again, just making this link in the research about metaphors and how much they influence and impact us. So there was, interestingly, this is about a virus, this one. And well, it's actually about a crime problem. Sorry, it's about a crime problem in a city and 2 groups of people. One has the crime problem talked about as a virus in the city, and the other group has the crime problem talked about as a ferocious beast in the city. So the people who are encouraged to think about the crime problem as a virus are much more likely to talk about, when they're asked for possible solutions, to talk about things like healthcare and education and, social things for the social good, poverty, how to kind of like cope with this virus and heal the system, as it were. People who explained this crime problem in terms of a ferocious beast in the city were much more likely to go with law and order type or authoritarian type advice to that. So that's just to say a little bit about metaphors, some of the research that's done about how metaphors influence us. Obviously, at the moment, we've got this idea of the language of healing is being pretty much translating into the language of the military. You know, it's a war. And this has happened a lot in particularly health issues, that there's a war, it's a battle. You know, there was somebody the other day, a nurse the other day, I think it was on that Panorama program that we had on the BBC here in the UK, that, who said, the thing is, you know, if you call us heroes, it's like it starts to become our lives are expendable. We're just the soldiers on the front line. It has that kind of impact on us. And it also means that when we call it a war, we're not always looking at what else might have to happen other than just some kind of militarized battle against it. Interestingly, and this might be interesting for us, and especially people at home on their own, or people who are trying to sort of cope psychologically with what's happening, that with cancer patients, there's some research that shows that for some people, thinking of cancer as a fight and cancer and the illness as an enemy leads to higher levels of depression and anxiety, to higher pain scores, and to lower coping scores. Now, this isn't true for everyone, but then I think people feel like they have to suppress their emotions. And so the idea of a battle or a fight, and you've got to kind of go to, for other people, it releases resilience and courage and persistence and all of those things. That we're not all the same, but it does that more in the context of, if this is a journey of kind of personal growth, it's a battle about personal growth and evolution and healing. But anyway, I thought that was interesting, because we're very, very inundated with this idea that the virus is the enemy, you know, the doctors are like the generals, you know, I mean, we're the patients are like the nurses are like the soldiers or whatever, you know, there are allies, there are weapons, which are the treatment. And I think it's just interesting for us to become aware of this and go, does this serving me in this moment? How else might I talk about it that preserves, sustains, and builds my sense of well-being, and the idea that we might emerge from this in a good way, after all, mainly. Although, of course, there will be, you know, tragic tragedies, you know. I thought that was very interesting. Metaphors aren't themselves good or bad, of course. They're like, how are they serving us? What sort of metaphors of healing or well-being? Is it a journey? Is it like, when you try out these different frames, how does your reality shift in the moment? And I have promised Muriel not to go on and on about invisible mugger. She has told me she will cut my audio. But personally, let me say it very calmly. As I take on board the coaching, you know, that I don't think that's helpful. I don't think, you know, this is what Boris Johnson called what's happening, an invisible mugger. And on the one hand, it helps us to realize that something is very dangerous going on. It wakes us up, it alerts us maybe. I mean, it has some positives, but I think for me, it distracts from a kind of overall focus on healing, well-being, the healthcare systems, the whole kind of community health in our food, our exercise, our day-to-day kind of psychological and social well-being. So I think I've got through that okay. So the second thing I wanted just to remind, particularly people in NLP, which also comes from, is a kind of part of this kind of conceptual metaphor theory as well, but shows up in our field in terms of submodalities, to remind you in the kind of pictures that you're making of things, that it tends to be that up is better, down is less important. Up is more important, down is less important. So if you want to reprioritize some things in your life, think about, could they go up a little bit higher in your mind's eye? Could the pictures and the representations of that, the way that you think about it, your construction, move up a little bit. And things that you don't want to dominate so much, move down a little bit more. So that's up and down, okay? And there's a lot of research into this, which I now see I don't have time to go into. Also, bigger and smaller. Bigger tends to be more important in the same way, more present, more real, more important. Smaller tends to be not so important. So in other words, this kind of, you know, degree of size and magnification of our images. Things you want to be bigger and more present, bring them nearer. Things you want to kind of think less about, make them smaller and further away. So that you've got big and small, you've got nearer, further, working together to help you organize for yourself how you're thinking about things, how you're structuring meaning making in your own mind. And the other one, of course, is brighter, darker, that kind of brightness, darkness, you know, things that are brighter are more compelling and real, things that are darker are less important, less compelling, less real. And so I think we can use this, that we know, like how to become aware and more reflective about how we're thinking about things day to day in terms of your goals. You know, do you want them up or down? You know, do you want them nearer, further, you know, bigger, smaller, brighter, darker? You know, things that you don't want, what sort of structure do you want to put those in? Things even day to day, like what do you want to eat? What are you looking forward to? How are you thinking about the future? How are you thinking about what might be possible? Where do you want to, and how do you want to structure bad memories or things that you don't want to think about? So that's just a kind of reminder that, and this is all borne out by research. You know, what are you looking forward to? How do you want to support your health? What kind of pictures and ideas do you have? And how do you want to code them? It's like the coding of how we attribute meaning and importance to ideas and our constructs. It's a bit like having, for NLPers, a bit like an internal kind of swish. And then the last thing I wanted to do, I was going to talk a bit more about the wounded healer actually as an archetype, but I think I might leave that now till another time and instead take you through the beautiful 3 archetype model that was developed by Stephen Gilligan and Robert Dilts. And to remind you, I know a lot of you have done this, but not everybody. And it's such a lovely model. And it's something you can just do in the moment automatically. So the model has that there are these 3 kind of archetypes. There's the archetype of the warrior, which is like your strength. I think Stephen Gilligan also calls it your fierceness, your strength and your fierceness. And it defends the boundaries. You know, it's like a strong first position where you know your goals, you know your values, you know, all of those kinds of things, the warrior archetype. Then the next one is the archetype of the lover. So that's more of a kind of softness. It's more a kind of heart archetype where you're soft and kind to yourself and you're soft and kind to others and understanding and appreciative of others. So that's more like the lover. It's like more of a heart energy. And then there's also the archetype of this kind of joker or trickster. And this is the archetype, and the energy that comes through is this idea of lightness. There's a kind of lightness and sparkiness and kind of easiness. Maybe it's a little bit of fun or a little bit of humor in the right kind of way that lightens the moment, lightens the mood. So with these 3, I'd like us to, I'm actually going to take the whole group through. Let's just, first of all, see if you sort of get in touch with your feeling of strength. What's that like? Just to allow the archetype of warrior just to kind of like be somehow in your body and to feel that energy of your own strength and fierceness. And just enjoy that. Enjoy being put your posture in the right way. Feel that your breathing settles down, that it's more like your lower center in your body, like your gut center. So that's like the archetype of the warrior. And then we'll let that go. And we'll bring in the archetype of the lover. So this you can feel, this is more soft, this is more tender, it's more gentle. You can feel it in your heart. And it's a kindness to you, kindness and gentleness and tenderness to others and to our world. And just allow yourself to experience that beautiful softness. And take a breath and then just gently let that leave your system. And then the last one is this archetype of this kind of, you know, joker or kind of trickster or the fool kind of thing, where there's a kind of lightness about things. You're not taking things too seriously. It's kind of, there's a fun there in a nice way, a nice kind of bubbly sort of human way. And again, feel, what is that like in your body? What would that do to your voice and your face? If you got a little smile on your face, you got a little bit more movement, you know, because it's a bit larky and sparky. And again, take a breath and just let that leave, but not the building. And so then, so how to work with this model is to have some kind of experience that you would like to enrich and enhance in this very, very simple kind of way. So take an experience and think about it. So everybody can do that. I mean, if we were in an NLP class, we might say, step into it, step into that experience or step into that memory. And the first thing we're going to do is bring in the warrior. This kind of strength and this sense of this beautiful, settled, centered kind of feeling of personal power, but that's very embodied and very ecological. And notice, what difference does it make in that situation you've selected? What difference does it make to have this kind of energy available to you? What difference does that make? And just register that, have a moment, and then let that go. Then we're going to bring in the energy of softness and tenderness and loving kindness and compassion from our hearts. Still in that situation that you've selected. If you had this more available to you, this feeling, this heart energy, more available and accessible to you in this situation, what difference would that make? How would things be? And it might be better, it might be worse, it might be the same, you know, it might be just different. Just register that. And take a breath, let it go. And still in that same situation you've selected, I'm going to bring in the archetype of like the joker or the kind of bit of the fool and go, what's it like to bring some lightness into that situation? So again, we're just using our imagination now to just sort of bring in a different quality and have accessible and available to us some different types of energy and moods. What difference would that make? To just be able to see the funny side of it a little bit more, or to feel it's a little bit lighter than you thought it was. And again, just be able to let that go. And now you have the opportunity to go, well, what did I just learn? To have a moment of reflection. What did I just learn? what might indeed, what combination of these three kind of energies, because you can think of them like primary colors, you know, you could have like a mix, like a billion different shades, you know, what's the right kind of combination if you brought it into that situation could make a positive difference in that situation where you feel more resourceful and resilient, where things seem more possible, where you sense more of your own capability, you have more of a kind of expectation of a kind of positive result and a positive future out of this. You know, so how would you use that model? And so sometimes even day to day, you can think to yourself, if you start to be more aware of your own mood, moment to moment, day to day, is there something missing that maybe I could draw into me? Am I losing a bit of my warrior here? Am I losing a bit of my kindness and tenderness to myself and to others? Am I getting a bit critical or a bit unkind somehow? Am I, although this is a kind of, you know, in many ways, awful situation, of course it is, but are there places where from time to time I can bring in some lightness? And I see, like, for example, the staff in the hospitals doing that. You know, there's lovely videos of staff doing like a little routine or something just to bring in that archetype of lightness, just because it's so not like that all the rest of the time for them, that to do that is a release and a relief for them. And it's a wonderful thing that they're able to do. I fully support everybody who can come together, even in the most difficult moments, and bring a kind of quality of life and energy and connection to a group of people working under, you know, just appalling and difficult times. So those are my three sort of things for the CommuniZoom today. Something about metaphors, to think about your language and the kind of metaphors we're all using. When is it helpful to you? When is it not? There's no good or bad really in this, but like what's helpful, what isn't, to sustain and maintain, you know, a positive kind of way forward for us all, so that what emerges from the emergency is something that we all want to, you know, participate in and create the new. Something about just reminding you of submodalities, the pictures that you make in your mind. Do you want them higher, lower, you know, bigger, smaller, nearer, further away? Do you want them brighter, darker? And then this idea of these kind of three archetypal energies, bringing those in to support and sustain you through these difficult days for all of us. So I hope you find that helpful. And it's just adorable and lovely to see you all. I wish you all the very, very, very best to you and your loved ones in this time of emergency and crisis and change. And lots of love from me and Muriel at PPD.